What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit podcast. I'm Corey, and today I have Dr. Anil Bajnath. Dr. Bajnath is a certified physician and the author of The Longevity Equation. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people on social media that talk about gene hacking and really reverse engineering your genomes and your microbiomes and all these things, right? Dr. Anil is just that. And he does it holistically and wholly, right? So a lot of stuff that you see on social media are people like Gary Brecka that go on Rogan and talk about maybe one little piece of the entire puzzle. What Dr. Bajnath and I talk about are those little pieces of the puzzle. Your genes are important. I know he tells me on this, your genes load the gun, your lifestyle pulls the trigger, which I thought was so true. But a lot of you would think, oh, well, my family, this or that runs in my family, and that's not necessarily true. And we talk a lot about that in this podcast. So listen, if you're really liking the content that I'm putting out, which is the same content that I've always put out, which is awesome interviews with people who interest me and have a lot of really cool shit to say, then consider subscribing to the channel. If not, that's cool too, but hopefully you will in the future. Also, like this video and then hit that bell notification so you get notified every single time I post new content. Enjoy this episode of the E4 Explicit podcast with Dr. Anil Bajnath. Peace out. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit podcast. I'm Corey, and today we have Dr. Anil Bajnath. We know each other from jiu-jitsu. Mike Stewart up in Rising Tide. I've been trying to get you on for a while, and I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your crazy schedule to get on here with me and educate the population about what you're doing. So you're an author, you're a physician, you're leading the way in a lot of things, and I want you to kind of, let us know, my listeners and watchers, who you are and what you're doing.
Oh, cool. Thank you, man. It's happy to be here. And my background is in molecular microbiology and medical laboratory science. I'm adjunct associate professor at George Washington University. I teach for the fellowship in integrative medicine. Additional training in, primary care, family medicine, but with, additional training in anti-aging and regenerative medicine, functional medicine, and things of that nature. And so I think we connected not only on the mats, but also, in regards to discussing various health issues and, my perspectives on that, and kind of shared with you my unique approach to, health optimization and longevity-based medicine. Got a book coming out. We did a soft launch recently at Longevity Fest. It's called The Longevity Equation. It should be out. My publisher is hoping for, a March release. We're looking at April, May, honestly, with the edits that I want to get done to it. So really into the longevity space and precision medicine space. I, I'm sitting in my office here, actually I built the office here next to Rising Tide High Tech in Hanover, Maryland. So I could be able to train.
That's so convenient.
Yeah. So just get plugged into my jiu-jitsu community and my guys here and everything else. So, what we do here at the Institute for Human Optimization is almost a clinical manifestation of one of the classes I teach for the fellowship 6205, which is the Omics of Medicine. And omics refers to the individual study of various aspects of the different biological sciences. For example, genomics is a study of the genes and the genome. Transcriptomics is a study of RNA and how genes are being expressed. Epigenetics is a study of how the environmental interface influences gene expression. Proteomics is a study of protein. Metabolomics is looking at the protein-protein interactions and how that influences cellular metabolism. So there's all these different omics that I typically look at with my patients. And I tell them, hey, I'm not trying to be your doctor, right? So when people come and see me, they've got a million doctors or they have their PCP and they have, people in place. I don't want to replace that. Stay connected there. I want to become more so your health intelligence partner where we kind of decode you from your DNA up. And we use this information to connect the molecular dots, right? So this is, most actively the greatest application for precision medicine. And the NIH defines precision medicine as the interface of, biology, environment, and lifestyle. And to me, that just sounds like really good freaking medicine, right? So it's very important to understand all the different confounding variables and signals and inputs that influence a person's pathophenotype or disease presentation, right? Starting off with some of those genetic predispositions that could be associated with, various levels of weakness and vulnerability to various ailments, metabolically or whatever it may be. So that's kind of, my approach to individualized care, and then I couple that with, aspects of longevity. I like to break down the different molecular mechanisms that mediate the biological aging process. And we have different ways of, monitoring, measuring, engaging those different biomarkers, and having, very specific targeted therapeutic applications, to address those issues of aging as a whole. So, with all of that, it's kind of led me down this very interesting avenue of medicine and healthcare. I was just on the phone with the chancellor of medicine at UCSF, and some of the directors of precision medicine at University of Pittsburgh, and we've got a whole laundry list of different doctors that we're pulling into the network. So, I was at University of Pennsylvania recently attending a multi-omic precision medicine conference, and I went up to the director and I'm like, hey, this is how I do precision medicine in my practice, outpatient, health optimization practice. And they were blown away with the different levels of testing that I'm able to gather, and the information I'm gathering, and the lens that we're viewing and interpreting this data through, through the, prevention and personalization and, and all of that stuff. So long story short, me and a group of colleagues, founded the American Board of Precision Medicine. So I'm the founder and president of the American Board of Precision Medicine. We have our initial cohort of physicians going through their program as we speak. And we're going to have our first graduating class here, hopefully by end of year 2024. Wow. And already have spoken to some of the larger institutions in medicine, the governing bodies that say, hey, what's legit, what's not legit. And our goal is to be the paradigm shift in medicine and healthcare that we need to see to bring it into the 21st century, so that we could no longer be doing this pill for ill model and really dialing into, the future of medicine, looking at things through the lens of precision. And there's limitations to precision medicine. It's not always taken into account. It places a strong emphasis on data collection and information, bioinformatics. But sometimes it doesn't have that that kind of emotional connection, like, for example, addressing trauma and how trauma influences our pathophenotype and our autonomic nervous system. So there, I do think precision medicine is going to lead the way into 21st century with more personalized interventions. But I also think that there's a couple of limitations to the quantification of this data and information that just requires a really good therapeutic relationship with your provider to really unpack.
Right.
But yeah, all right. That I'm done with my ramble. Cool.
No, that was, dude. I mean, you saw PCP. That's primary care physician for anyone out there, not PCP, the drug. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. And one thing that you said really stuck out to me, which I've always thought this way. And I've seen a couple people, obviously everyone knows on my channel, I listen to Joe Rogan quite a bit. And he always has, I forget his name, out in Texas.
The Ways to Well guys?
Ways to Well, yeah. He always has, and they always talked about preventative care versus, like you just said, taking a pill. Like, it's almost like our system is waiting for people to get sick and almost enabling them to get sicker. And then, oh, take this pill. And it's just like this cycle of, like, the pharmaceutical companies are making a ton of money because of all these pills. People are naturally getting sick for whatever reason, whether it's our lifestyle, whether it's we're around, chemicals for work and stuff like that. But we're always getting sick. And the older you get, the more ailments you're going to have. And it's just like, okay, we'll take this pill. It's going to make you better. When I see some of these pharmaceutical commercials, and it's like a joke. Every time I watch it, I'm like, the small, quick verbiage that they say, it's like, oh, everyone running in a field of daisies and it feels great. And it's like, oh, well, you could have, 15 kinds of cancer and you might die. It's like, what the hell, man? Like, versus looking at a different perspective, like you're talking about a more preventative approach and really understanding what your body is doing and what it's not doing, what it needs, what it doesn't need, I think is, like, crucial, and no one's talking about it.
Yeah, no, the whole fucking healthcare system is fucked.
It
right?
is. Yeah.
Boiled down to, right? And it's not to say pharmaceuticals are bad, but they're these heroic interventions when people are just really reach a biological threshold, a point of no return, right? So the problem is how do we prevent people from getting there, right? Because I'm not going to shit on the pharmaceutical industry, because they're our greatest allies and resources with moving things in the right direction to a certain extent. And I'm being very PC in that statement. I don't means. I want to build bridges, not, walls here with when it comes down to this shit.
Right.
So reality is, because right now precision medicine's kind of ingrained with precision oncology and pharmacogenetics and things of that nature. But what you highlighted was the emphasis of, the core philosophy of precision medicine. And actually, one of the visionary leaders in this space is a gentleman by the name of Leroy Hood. And he's with the Institute for Systems Biology out of, California. And long story short, he's a, leader in the space, and he's going to be a part of our board of medicine. And he's written the textbooks on systems biology, and he's coined the term P4 medicine. P4 medicine stands for personalized, predictive, preventative, and participatory. The problem is, in most conventional settings, it's kind of like this fuck you, fix me attitude towards, healthcare. It's like they come in and they're like, all right, well, how much are you willing to change? I've dealt with it, in primary care historically. It's like, all right, this is your third COPD exacerbation. When are you going to stop smoking cigarettes?
Right.
No,
never.
No. Participate in your health. I'm sorry, you're going to be going down a different road of management that just requires you chasing your tail. And it's just going to be a slow, prolonged pain in the ass, right? And then, there's the other side of things where it's like, all right, you and I, we both listen to Rogan. We play, train jujitsu. We place emphasis on health and nutrition and supplements and prevention and all that other stuff. Here in my practice, we're actually doing stem cells and a lot of those regenerative therapies as well here in Maryland. And, just trying to work on how do we move that needle, in results and outcomes. How do we reverse your biological age? Because that is a kind of a novel concept now, that there's actually ways to measure your biological age on a deeper molecular level and in various levels and aspects. And how do we move that back, so that we're actually enhancing a favorable aging process. So with that being said, I don't think the answer is going to be polypharmacy and tons of drugs and medications, but more so health education, cause and effect relationships, data-driven health, right? Where you're going to be held accountable in regards to what's going on. If you eat like shit and you sit on the couch all day, or if you sit in a chair like me, seeing patients, and there's no physical activity, guess what? Sitting is the new smoking. Your cardiovascular health is going to suffer, right? And there are all these different factors that you need to look at, in regards to addressing, health outcomes. So, for example, the integration of biometric data is critical, whether it's using a CGM, using an Oura ring, to track your sleep and your stress levels, I think it's going to be really informative and part of that self-actualization process of, oh man, last night I had, a few old fashions, a steak. It was super late. My sleep sucked. Yeah, no shit. Right.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Do it all the time, right? 80-20, right? Create that balance. And, at the core of all of this is going to be, how do we cultivate resiliency, right? Because, at the end of the day, aging is a bioaccumulation of damage that it kind of interrupts our ability to adapt to different, stressful situations and making us more lack of resilience or, susceptible to whatever it is, and we have all these different homeodynamic capacities to adapt to these stressors in our environment. But how do we really make sure that, we're not, increasing what's called our allostatic load, right? An allostatic load and allostasis refers to the total burden of stress in a very specific system. So if you're sleep deprived, like a resident is, and in residency where you're just working the night shifts, rounding in the morning, and, just brain dead, like I did for many years, you're needless to say, your resiliency towards sleep is compromised, right?
Right.
And the need for that, the REM deficit is real. Nutrition, if the nutrition sucks, guess what? You're not going to have that resiliency towards, cardiometabolic health. You're going to be increasing your biological aging process on multiple levels, and there are different biomarkers to look out for that. So, it's a spectrum of things,
Right. Well, so let's say two things. One, I want to talk about the kind of uphill climb, it seems like, because you're going not against anyone, like you said. You want to work with these pharmaceutical companies, and it seems much more of like a cultural shift that people have to make. And it's funny because when you watch somebody on Rogan or talk to someone like you, it's like, this makes so much sense. I know what I need to do. I know what I should do. but the convenience, my brain has been tampered with for the last 35 years to do X, Y, and Z, not to think like this. So how do you and your board and the people like you how are you going to combat that, what I believe is like a cultural issue with people thinking that like, oh, well, everything's fine, it's not bothering me right now. But it's like, what you do in your 30s and even in your 20s, I feel like affects you. Like, I'm honestly, dude, I'm 35 and I'm feeling it now. Like things that I like could not do in even my like mid to late 20s. I'm like, damn, dude, like I can't do those like I used to. I know like growing up, you always hear adults say that, but that shit's true. So it's like, how many times in generations do we have to hear that before like we say, okay, you know what? We need to shift this mindset and go this direction instead. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a huge cultural difference both publicly and medically, right? And the reason why we formed the board was to basically train doctors on, seemingly how to really start looking at things, because you're either going to age aggressively, you're going to develop cancer, or you're going to cultivate health. And there's actually some really good publications in Nature and Cell Biology that have these larger philosophical conversations of the end results of life, aging, cancer, autoimmune, health, and how to kind of navigate that complex conundrum of N of one medicine. Now, the problem that I have with all these gurus out there is that they're all professing, hey, go this way for you, it's all good, just go carnivore, or just go vegan, or just whatever. To me, that's I get where you're coming from. However, you're neglecting a very important component to medicine or healthcare, and that's N of one. Everybody's genetic blueprint's completely different. Their ancestral Paleolithic diet is completely different. So there's so many different factors that could influence the pathophenotype. So when people are out there making extreme, suggestions, recommendations on diet or even exercise, that's kind of negligent in the sense that you got to look at everybody on a case-by-case basis. My genes are totally different than your genes. Right. My environment's totally different than your environment. And all those different factors need to be taken into account with the personalization of medicine. That's it. So even from a pharmacogenomic perspective, certain people are more susceptible to drug toxicities because they lack the enzymes in their liver, their cytochrome P450s, needed to metabolize those drugs or medications appropriate. And they're the ones that are more susceptible to toxic side effects, right? So there's a lot of different factors. And the thing is, how do we shift the population to think this way is just look at your friends and family,
Literally.
That's it. That's all you got to do. And if you're not motivated by that, I don't know, I don't know how to strike that chord within an individual to get them, motivated to take, their health into their own hands and try to work on their just overall self-care. But that's a personal, philosophical, self-actualization conversation that, people need to have real talks on, because I have patients that are like, you know what, I'm just going to grind as hard as possible and I'm going to do as much damage. We all think that way, especially, us guys in our 20s and whatnot. And then you get to like 30-ish and then 35-ish and you're like, oh shit, I can't keep doing this. The accumulated damage is real and it's going to really, hinder our ability to perform. For us, we're in our 30s and, I don't know about you, but the person that I fear the most on the mat, besides a black belt, is a college wrestler,
Oh my God, yeah.
So when I see the college wrestlers, I know, hey, it's like riding a bull. I'm just trying to hold on, for dear life and not pass out, because it's a totally different beast.
It is.
So from a training perspective, that's, what motivates you? What makes you tick? Why? What influences you? So at the core of this, it's a deeper philosophical conversation about, motivation, desire, and self-actualization. Right. And I don't know, those aren't topics that influencers really get into, unfortunately, on TikTok or Facebook or whatever,
That's 100% true. That's always like, go carnivore. It's more broad. Like this will work when like the 30-30-30 rule, whatever. I saw that one time. I was like, let me try this. I'm like, actually let me not try this, because this is not custom to me. This is just like a broad thing that got millions of views. But I wanted to ask you about genetics, because I always hear, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like everyone's like, oh, well, obesity runs in my family, or this runs in my family, or that. And I've always been like, well, yeah, but like, look how your grandmother used to eat. Look how your mom used to eat. Look how you know what I mean? Like, if you go back far enough, like the consumption was different, obviously, because like my grandparents, a lot of the meals that I grew up eating, like kale and potatoes, like those are all like depression meals, like Great Depression meals, because they were poor, they had no money. So like there's that, but then it's like the next generation. I feel like parents, like my parents, like okay, like McDonald's was huge, but like fast food came along. A lot of what's it called? Different types of sugars and stuff like that. Corn syrup and all those things, like high fructose corn syrup, like came along, and really the American diet with bigger portions came. So it's like, well, yeah, like I don't personally believe that it's 100% of your genetics. Well, my mom was big and my grandmother was big. Well, they were also eating like shit and not exercising. So if you're also going to do that, then you also will have the same result, is my idea, but I'm also not a doctor. So what are your thoughts on like that stuff?
Well, that refers to the epigenetic programming and the environmental interface on gene expression. Just because you have a genetic propensity doesn't mean you're going to necessarily express those specific profiles, right? So, they say, genes are loading the gun, environment is pulling the trigger. So, and one of the, courses that I teach, we look at the nutrigenetic association and how your genes are influenced by different foods, right? So we have the ability to feed our cells the right information, right? Because food is information communicating with your DNA, influencing gene expression, right? So phytonutrients and pigments and all these different, phytonutrient compounds are actually going to go in there and have an effect on G protein coupled receptors that go back into the cell signal transduction, right? So with that being said, if we eat a pro-inflammatory standard American diet, well, guess what's going to happen next, right? We're going to be inflamed, right? That constant inflammation is going to lead to, just besides a pro-inflammatory cytokinetic milieu or environment that is incredibly inflamed, it's going to weaken your immune system. It's going to weaken your ability to think and perform. Your recovery from the gym, if you go to the gym, is going to be even dampened even further. So there's all these different clinical manifestations due to the nutrition we feed ourselves, the stress, our allostatic load on our autonomic nervous system, and our stress response, and all these other compounding variables. So I mean, it's a summation of everything. And you're absolutely right, say, yeah, you might have some genetic propensities and dispositions, but what is going to be the greatest influencing factor to kind of mitigate the expression of those genes is going to be a healthy diet and lifestyle.
Right, 100%. Okay, so with that said, like, I always feel that, and it's so much easier now because social media has kind of just taken over the world, and it's like, there's so many, like you said, gurus and experts out there that are saying, eat this, eat that. It's like, it's so hard to know what to do. And without knowing, like doing tests like you're talking about and really knowing what your actual body needs, it's you don't know what to do, but it's also, it could be dangerous to not just like go out there and do certain exercises, but like consume certain things that you think is good for you. I went vegan for 2 years. It was the worst 2 years of my life. I hated it. Because I watched a fucking documentary, and it was like, I gained weight on it, and I'm like, what the hell? And then, the other part is, before I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was like looking, I felt like I was depressed. I was like low energy, all this stuff. I went to my primary care, and the first word out of her mouth was like Cialis. And I told her, I'm like, I don't want drugs. Like, I know there's other ways to do it. And then I started really getting into Rogan and listening to those guys, and like, all right, well, let me like, fitness I know can like reduce a lot of these things. And then the 7 a.m. classes were like a life changer for me. You know what I mean? It was like, I was like, not only I created a bond with people, but like was exhausting myself to where like, I just felt amazing. And then I like learned that about my body, never took any kind of antidepressants or any kind of drugs or any kind of like any pharmaceutical. And now I believe that like physical activity can trump all of that if it's done obviously in a proper setting. But what are your thoughts on that when it comes to like, there's so many things to pick from. What do we do?
Well, and that's the thing. Like when I see patients, I dissect everything, diet, nutrition, and there's so many different filters that we could place on personalizing nutrition, physical activity, eating to perform, very important. Looking at your VO2 max and, kind of determining the appropriate partitioning of macronutrients, looking at your genetics as well to saying, hey, there's some genes that influence your beta carotene utilization, vitamin D utilization, the methylation thing that everybody's talking about again since Gary Brecka was on Rogan speaking about MTHFR, so many different variables and different things. That's just one little speck in the giant equation that is you, the individual. So, and again, knowing what drives you, what makes you, motivated and what you desire, for, I think both of us, it's easy to say it's our ability to kind of keep up, recover, adapt, train, emphasis our training. And I think, the jiu-jitsu community specifically, it's just different, man, because that feeling that you just described of going and training and pushing yourself to physical limitations that you never experience is really significant. Right. And then I think you alluded to like the carnivore craze right now. And I've seen, people coming through, and I know there's a lot of people that are LDL deniers trying to say, oh, LDL now it's fake. It's fake.
LDL.
Yeah. The bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
Right. Yes and no. And there's so many other factors, LP little a, LP, ApoB, LPPLA2, all these other biomarkers that docs aren't looking at that further risk stratify you for atherosclerosis or heart disease, right? So I think, taking the deeper dive, and there are these hyper responders to carnivore where their cholesterol at baseline goes from, 240 to like over 500. And it's like, holy shit, that's not good. You don't want to do that, right?
Right.
And then, stacking that, there is, especially in our community, there are people, when you go and you push yourself on those physical limits like we do on the mats, right? Or, whatever it is, if you're an ultra marathon runner or an Ironman or whatever it is, and you're pushing yourself on those thresholds of like near death and failure.
Pass out.
Right? Yeah. That's also dangerous. That's too extreme. Why? There's studies from Dr. O'Keefe, I forgot what university, that's looking at marathon runners and, having that high degree of plaque burden and accumulation in their arteries. Why? Because of shear stress against the endothelium. So coupling carnivore and having this high dyslipidemia, LDL or not, oxidized or not, particle size or whatever, I don't give a shit, right? And that high shear stress against the vascular endothelium is a recipe for heart disease. And when do you start looking at that? Well, I'm in my 30s and I have, a significant, burden of plaque in my arteries, because I've been scanning myself since I was like 32, looking at this information and trying to get a better hold on it and we're trying my best to reverse plaque. I have my nurse here with me now and she's infusing, very specific IVs, to help combat against, plaque accumulation in my arteries. It's special therapy that we have here in the office. And, so it's like, it's all those factors. What makes you tick, right?
Right.
What's your baseline,
Right.
So that's where, again, in my book, The Longevity Equation, I talk about, something that I trademarked, and I wholly believe in what's called our biological 401k. I believe that we all have our internal biological health savings account for which we're making daily deposits and withdrawals to, right? And in different forms of bioenergetic currency that has a direct effect on your epigenetic programming. And that's going to be, diet, exercise, sleep, nutrition, meaning and purpose, relationships, and so forth, right? And every day we have the ability to make deposits into this health savings account. But we're also going to deduct it because if, when I go travel, I want to go eat, enjoy a cocktail, stay out late, have fun, hang out, but we know that sleep deprivation, maybe, a more stressful meal or whatever it is, is going to deduct from that savings account. It's checks and balances and making sure that we're making enough deposits, right? So that our ROI or return on investment is going to be increasing your health span over a lifespan. We have the ability to measure that, where you're at with your checking account, so to speak, or your 401k in regards to biological age testing. And when I break down somebody's biological age, I'm looking at multiple different parameters, not just epigenetics, but a bunch of other tests. So, with that being said, there's a lot of opportunities, but it starts off with where the hell you're at, in life, motivate you, what limitations do you have? I have a 14-month-old at home and I'm telling you, my sleep has gone down to, it's gone bad, right? My Oura ring yells at me, right? Yeah. But there's certain things out of our locus of control that, that influences our different checks and balances and the different savings accounts, sleep, diet, exercise, nutrition, and so forth, that we need to monitor.
Right. So I don't want to ask, okay, what's something that the John Doe can do, because like we just talked about, that's what a lot of people are out there saying and doing. Oh, there's this one thing that you can do to change this or that, and it's not that simple.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's a summation of everything.
Right. So like, where can people kind of find you? I know you probably got to run. So where can people find you? And how, like, what do you like? Do you have like a special equipment? Like, how are you getting all this information? What do you do? Are you like Lex Luthor or something? Like, we don't know. Like, what's going on?
I have people sending samples of, blood, urine, saliva, stool, all over the place. We're analyzing everything. We're taking a deep dive. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to be your doctor, right? There's a million doctors out there. Leave me alone. If you want that conventional allopathic kind of approach, it's not to say I don't follow the standards of care and the guidelines. I expand upon it, right? And I think give people access to this information and data that pursue it. Because again, genomic analysis is not a part of routine screening at all, right? Unless there's something weird that we can't figure out. But for me, I know that, we have our book of life that's been genetically kind of written by our biological mother and biological father. And, even just going 10 generations up, there's thousands of co-authors that have led to this inheritance of data and information. And, these 23 chapters of our book of life has so much information and kind of puts us in, tells us where to look under the hood, right? And try to pay attention to, say, oh, we got issues there, methylation or, other nutrigenomic associations or other cardiovascular implications. LP(a), do you know how many times I see people with, the genes for LP(a), crazy high LP(a), which is a biomarker for atherosclerosis, another, lipoprotein that's associated with, heart disease. And, they might have a normal lipid profile, but their LP(a) is high, and that predisposes them towards accelerated atherosclerosis, blood clots, hypercoagulability, and so forth. And so I think it's important to understand your book of life and then build on that and then just measure things, right? So I'm a data guy. I like to look at those molecular kind of inputs. Mm-hmm. And once we get a better understanding where your baseline's at, we've got interventions here at the Institute, from hyperbaric oxygen therapy and photobiomodulation, stem cell medicine, different, techniques, intravenous techniques that are really cutting edge. It's going to move the needle to help with regeneration.
Right.
But the thing is, I only take on a handful of patients a year, right? I'm not trying to schedule with me, it's a little bit more challenging because of all the different things that are going on. But essentially that's why I wrote the book, is to kind of get this information out there, disseminate, the information so that people could kind of become their own, kind of a biohacking solution and provide them with the tools so that they can make informed decisions about their health.
I love that, because I've dealt with that my whole life. I've had 3 open heart surgeries, congenital heart disease, like always been like, oh, well, we don't know what's wrong. Let's figure this out. Let's run this test. Let's run that test, versus being proactive. My cardiologists have always been great. I'm talking mainly primary care. And one thing that I noticed as I got older, when I started learning about the kind of the hacking and everything, I was working with a company that kind of does what you were doing, and they were going to look at all my stuff. And I couldn't even get my insurance to cover a full panel of blood work because I'm a quote unquote, air quotes, healthy 30-year-old at the time. And you don't need all that data. And I'm like, I absolutely do though. Like I want to give all these I want a full panel, because when you do normal blood work, sometimes it's not a full panel. You have to ask for certain things so you as a doctor can see. So I just thought that was like a red flag. You got the insurance company, the pharmacy, you got all these big things that you're kind of going up against. So how does, are you covered by insurance? Is it out of pocket? What does that look like?
It's all out of pocket.
That's what I thought. Okay. Yeah.
Because the thing is, first of all, you don't want, insurance knowing your certain information. Let's just leave it at that. Right. Even, life insurance policies and things of that nature, that's a touchy subject. So I think that's more personal data that should be kept personal, and you should have ownership of that data. In regards to blood work, it's so frustrating because you could go and get, cash panels that's a fraction of the cost, maybe $300 to $500, right? Whatever it is. And then that same panel that you got for $300 to $500 is like $5,000 that the lab is charging insurance, which is completely bullshit. Yeah. So the whole system, like I said, is fucked, right? From the beginning, right? So I don't have a solution for that. I don't care, right? I don't want to mess with that, because that whole headache and mess to me is just kind of self-limiting in a lot of different respects. If people want their own cash profile, there are different resources out there, like from Alta Health, Access Labs, and directlabs.com, that they could go and order their own health profiles and get it at a fraction of the cost, and through LabCorp and Quest.
Right.
Go do it, right? Go do it. Learn about what it is, right? And, take things, you take control of your own health. That's it, because when we go to the doctor for the annual physical and they run a CBC, which is cute, a CMP, which is okay, and then maybe a 1950s lipid profile, that's bullshit. It's complete bullshit, right? Why do we have to fight for a C-reactive protein to look at inflammation? Why do we have to fight for a homocysteine? Why do we have to fight for vitamin D, levels? That's fucking stupid, right? So my background, molecular microbiology, medical laboratory science, right? So the medical laboratory science thing really resonates with me, and it was what brought me to the whole functional medicine world. And the reality is, right, we need to move that needle. Insurance, there's testing out there I can't even begin to tell you about, right? And then when you get into it from the longevity perspective, measuring different biomarkers of aging is critical, right? Are we accelerating that process? What's our cellular senescence look like? Or those zombie cells that, enhance, the biological aging process? Why are, we should be looking at that, right? So we need to expand our diagnostic capabilities. And dare I say, one of the other ventures I'm working on top of the American Board of Precision Medicine, is my own diagnostic testing company, so that we could centralize all this data and information, put it together, have it in one cohesive centralized platform with the appropriate bioinformatics to connect the molecular dots. Because, for me right now, I'm piecemealing it, right? And it's like, it's a pain in the ass. I want it all centralized in a platform. So, definitely a lot of conversations around that with different companies and investors and so forth. But, that's more to come on that one. So with all that being said, that's my positioning. Again, you can find me at the Institute for Human Optimization, ifho.org. Could email support@ifho.org, to see if we could, if we're a good fit. Right now, I'm not taking on a ton of people, just because of, capacity. But if we have highly motivated people that are, interested in biohacking, and, I like sitting down, I'm looking at some, stem cell stuff here under the microscope, in my office. But, if I get the right person, right, I'll work with you, right? Because I've been in environments where I did not have the opportunity to kind of select who I work with. And like I said, going back to that "fuck you, fix me" attitude, I'm done with it. Right. If you're not willing to stop smoking or stop eating shit, I'm not for you, man.
No, you can't do that. You can't fix that. No, there's nothing you could do to fix that. But okay, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on and kind of educating myself and everybody listening or watching on the hacking, and just kind of to listeners and watchers out there, really do your research, because Gary Brecka, these people who are out there who are huge names in stuff like this, they're great and all, but they're speaking to the masses. So you need to really identify what is working for yourself, and not just, everyone out there. So I think that's really important, and I want to hit that home. So, and I know we talked a lot about that already, but Anil, man, thank you so much for coming on. I'll drop all your information in the description below. But that's another episode for the E4 Explicit podcast. We'll see you next time.